Can I try something? Here goes. Since my bio photo is of me in a white t-shirt, I thought it might be funny to wear a full suit today. But it made me uncomfortable so quickly and thoroughly, even at the idea level, that I left it alone at the idea level and then put it here in this one sentence, self-referential anecdote that it is. Another idea I had was to make a little pamphlet of my poems and title it Cold Open, and then say, by way of introducing me or my poems, and then just state the title, Cold Open, and then just begin reading from there. A mild chuckle or a droll roll of the eyes is sort of how I roll up my sleeves and get to work in the funny business of poetry. That queer and sometimes frightening, often surprising, occasionally funny way of looking at things, which reminds me of one more semi-serious gag I had in mind for today. Since some of my poems wade into darker political waters, I thought I might show up in a Guy Fawkes mask, the one the anarchist internet hacker group named Anonymous uses. But although I have affinities for some of their positions, and although I love the idea of being completely anonymous, I figured it was too late for that. I'd only end up distracting from my own thought experiments, which I very much hope you'll enjoy. Okay, so that was a script of a prompt, an impetus for sake of reading the room. It was also something I wanted to try because the idea of trying it made me extremely uneasy. And this is still part of the prompt, which I probably shouldn't say if I want your sympathy. But I wanted to use it to make a point. Poetry, as I see it, isn't about comfort. It's about trying things you're a little scared of or uncertain about, testing yourself and others thereby. It's about scratching under the surface to see what else is there, what's there to be found, imagined, and remade all at once. So this is not typed now, this is handwritten. As a person, I seem to be nervous beyond relief. There's no relief. And so it's not beyond belief that I'd have views like these, a need to make things, poems, that are sort of like guides, also like guises. More than anything else, I hope they read like open questions. So let me turn to those. So by way of illustration of my themes, techniques, concerns, and obsessions, I'll read a number of poems from my so-called finished manuscript titled Kindergarten. Questions are welcome at any point. In fact, if it's an urgent enough question in the middle of the poem, I do that. But especially after each poem. After I read some from there, I'll read a handful of poems from Tremblum, which is a manuscript very much still a work in progress. So here is a hymn to running with it, living with difference. It's in two parts. First part is titled Outrunning, second part titled Catharsis, and the overall title is On Rainbow Road. Outrunning. Passing by the large open garage, I heard a dad say, "Go round the other way," to his young child, a boy about to climb into the family SUV. After a brief delay, the boy responded and repeated, "I'll go underwards, underwards." Through the back and underneath the seat, I assumed, but didn't see. Happy to take the underworld way, he was, and I was grateful not to hear any explanation afterwards that forward and backward, upward and downward, do not extend to underwards, up here, where things are not as open or as close as they appear. Catharsis. Like having overheard whispers today for the first day decrypted. An autistic child running through the street shouting, "I'm a sad story, I'm a sad story." Like two passer-bys, confused and moved to joy, to question themselves. However troubled and alloyed, fast as a child with news, as it happens, to include. So if there are no questions, I will just continue.
Oh, wait, I have a question.
Okay.
So did those come to you, like, tell me how those poems came to be. Like, what was the...
Rainbow Road is a real road near me, and those were real life anecdotes, I suppose you'd say.
That's what I suspected, but I wanted to...
Mildly edited to fit the two-part structure of the poem. So,
you said something about being nervous beyond belief. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I get that way sometimes.
Oh, well, I guess I have social anxiety. I have fear of public speaking that's as high as it gets. But over the course of my life, when I was in college, for example, I tried anti-anxiety medication. I didn't like it. I know there are better ones now. I try to push through it and just own it, put it out there, disclaim, and live with it. And hard run helps me some, beyond relief. So primarily, I mean beyond chemical alteration. So, and I don't know, I shouldn't ask your experience, but if you want to talk at any point, I mean it literally. Next poem. Okay. I have a fondness for the Tao, as in Taoism, which means, well, a lot of things, but it can be taken to mean the way, generally. I especially love and try to practice the first verse, which in the translation of Crispin Sartwell is, naming things loses what unites them. Failing to name things loses them into what unites them. So you could think of that as a damned if you do, damned if you don't, or you could think of it as an opportunity in both directions, since there's sort of no way out of that. So here's a small poem about this in some way called Lucky Day. The way is losing the way, says the Tao. And how do you do? Replies the lost, kissed moth right across my lips. Before I can say anything about Blake and try to make it stick, fluttering fool that I am, I'm kissed by this missed destination. My mouth still abuzz with a beat of bouncing from need to know, and likely never will. Some are minor little, very short kind of epigrams or whatever. So that's that poem. I'll just kind of like shout at me if or otherwise I'll want to continue. I tried to arrange these to kind of pick up one from the next anyhow. So the next one is titled The Little Fluke. A flack of luck as I think of it, the hap in happiness, neutral as a flake of schist, of snow, of skin. Whatever time we're in, we'd better make a memory. However unnoteworthy the melody, the party, however parted, however shared, the little flare of conscious coincidence that need not be more mystical or woozy than the sides of a vertex, our chairs turned at whatever angle we edge together. I remember sourdough toast we loved outdoors on that tiny patio, seaside garden, stepping stones into a breakfast rest, a luxury of time to sit inside a moment. Provincetown 15 years ago, as if a cafe, long since closed, could come visit me, nestled in a reverie. As if I sort of knew that calm watercolor day, that it would, at some odd hour, turn up naked, lost, flush with faith in detours, asking for directions with a smile I wouldn't know how to turn away.
I love your emphasis when I wanted to ask how do you go about the physical format? I harbor specifically was one of that came to my mind, your physical formatting the words and the stanzas. How do you
Harbor is in sort of
no harbor your poem? Did
Oh, I just meant, did you mean that certain phrases are in sort of like little?
No, like I hear when you're speaking at like the emphasis like of toast of reverie and
Right.
I didn't know if that emphasis played into like the physical format of like, you know, sometimes you'll just have one line and then 4 words are spaced out or.
Right. So let's see if I can say anything useful about that. I try as much as possible to make each line kind of like a monostick. Like it could be a one-line poem. Of course, that's an absurd ideal. Most lines could never really have that, but I always try to think of it that way. And then I feel like that's my default, so that if I read it just clipped as what's there, I don't read a lot. I mostly think of poems as a visual phenomenon and something for private, exploration. So I don't really have a solid answer other than to say, I guess it's where it falls when it seems right to fall there. I guess I try to give it enough of a framework that if I kind of have to flinch back to just what's there, that it's kind of in little sections that can hang on their own as much as possible. I don't really know how I would choose an emphasis in general, or yeah. I'll probably think of a better answer at the end. That's thanks.
Got a question.
Yeah.
Could you say anything about your experience with publishers and how you've wanted to present an art, one of your poems, how it should be presented in a publication? Have you ever had any issues with how it was actually published and how you went around to make sure?
Once in a while, I write a purely concrete poem in the technical sense that the shape matters. I'm always kind of obsessive about the shape to begin with, but like that I need it to look like a cutout shape. Or one time I made what I called a cairn of holes instead of a cairn of rocks. It was the negative space, and I was like obsessed about this. But then at the same time, it kind of just wanted to be that, or that's the psychology of it. And yeah, not everyone is super sensitive to that obsession, I guess, in thinking that you're going to read it all the same anyway. It's all going to run together. So
I think that's lovely, like as a cross platform of visual medium as well. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, that dynamic I have no solid theory for. So okay, the next one. So here's a kind of a page that's new. I really am into etymology. So etymology is the facts about the origin and development of a word, and just digging into it, sometimes reimagining it where there are big gaps and there's room to play. Because take the etymology of etymology. It's very useful, but it's very boring. It means what it means. It already means the study of Greek word for, I think etymos was true or actual or something like that. So it's like study of the real. Yes, that's what we're doing. But then, I've noticed that some people think etymology is boring because of that familiarity with it in the democracy means rule of the people. Oh, okay. Now we're happy. It's content. But I find there's always more to look for. So this is a poem that goes there, and a lot of them that follow and that I've written try to go there, even though it's one of those areas that could be, I don't know, just needlessly wonky. But there's a section in this poem that recalls a Merwin poem, W.S. Merwin, and I could read that too. Actually, I should. So I'll read the last 3 lines of For the Anniversary of My Death from Merwin. As today, riding after 3 days of rain, hearing the wren sing and the falling cease, and bowing, not knowing to what. I love those 3 lines. So love them so much that occasionally I absorbed it into this as much as I could. So the poem is called Puddle. And here we go. Originally diminutive of ditch, it clung to lagoons and pools as well, which to me is a lovely humble hold. This little lake a pond, a luke-cold puddle to ponder on, or in, water, a nervous waiter. Water, I know you, stagnate without moving through peoples and pebbles. through the glimmer of springs and the glamour of worms, through drafts and drifts, through the valves and vaults of earth, the salt and sedge of earth, the wide-eyed sky of earth. Earth, I start to hear it as, start to want to call it. After days of rain, who knows why words cease and wrens sing, and prayer bows from the preposter all the way to us. Just now, rinsing off time's line. Time fills a hole into a shape of water, whole as any other. Water's always on my mind. I'm a Pisces. I don't read a great deal into that, but it's unavoidable. So, okay. Here's a poem that should have facial expressions, but I can't do them. So if you could imagine them, that would be great. And it's in two parts, another two-parter. First part's called Turned In, and the second part, To a Tree. So you can think of Ovid or anything else you like. The roots of twisted words. Let me do that again. It's called, how perfect. The roots of twisted words. Turned in. The way some look on water, enough to drink or drown in, feeling something else is possible. A certain thirst is quenchable. Narcissus made a study of himself, one gaze face after another. If I am to survive scrutiny, first I have to learn the rules of reaction. What do my emotions mean to my mouth and cheeks, my eyes and brow? How much of feeling can be shown? Shown or displayed? Directly or filleted? Overjoyed like this? Resolute like this? Rueful like this? Beautiful like this? Caught in the act, Narcissus, unguardedly and stuttering, spoke against assumptions, ready to a group of men with a fish in their net. No, I don't want me. If anything, I want youth, or not even that, only time, just time to see what it is I'm looking at. To a tree. Between a man and a woman, it said, as if it were a secret whispered in a treehouse, then later in correct colonnades down select passageways. As if it were a secret that would, if told, be less special, less lock and key, more looked over, the chance to see the mirage in marriage. As if it were a secret, how we go there thirsty anyhow, how paradise is anywhere, the air is clear enough for pairs of eyes to raise a tree despite the gravity. As if it were a secret, how love grows from anything, even carbon, filaments to figments of our own desire, ghosts of whomever's holy making, as if it were a secret that could be kept from taking root. How soon a lift of arms will allow all within the willow. So the last words there are actually 4 lines, even though it's, how many words? 6 words. Will allow all within the willow is one of the like little visual things that, so will allow, if you visualize it, has an all in it. And then if you take the all out, you have just willow. So if you put the all in, it's literally allowed in. Sometimes I obsess over those in ways that do not work, and once in a while I like that one worked. I think that belonged there. So,
So I'm going to interrupt.
Sure.
I like to interrupt. The last 2 poems, right? So that's engaging with Ovid, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
And then before that with the other poet. Like, how do you relate to other poets, and how do you engage with their work, and what do you look for in other poets?
Fluidly, lucidly, I hope. Not didactically. I try not to be real name droppy, and there are some poems in Tremblum, actually the new one, that almost feel too much in that direction. Like I'm taking from a Hopkins poem, and it's very deliberate. And like the piece that I put in about the Merwin poem, I don't say that I do, and I don't epigraph it, or telegraph it in any way. I told you about it, but I wanted you to appreciate that. But,
So with the Ovid, did you engage with the text of the Metamorphoses when you did that, or you just know the story?
I love the Narcissus myth. I've seen it in various incarnations, and Echo's role, and I feel that Echo's been blamed needlessly, and so is Narcissus, of course. That poem was sort of like, clearly trying to stick it to the why that myth got to be that way.
Right.
So,
for you, it's more about the myth than about the Ovid.
yeah. Oh, I love Ovid, but it's not in particular.
Right.
Yeah, I've looked at when I was writing this a few years ago. I looked at everything I could find about Narcissus to see if anyone had said something about that, and I wasn't finding that this poem had been written in just the way I wanted to write it. So I wrote it. That sounds really confident, like I knew that. But I was really playing around, and then it worked out, I guess. So, yeah, I have some favorite poets. I could mention at the end, maybe if like some of my favorite people are. Anything could go in at any time. I'm not immune. I'm very porous to sort of anything that would suggest itself. I think poetry should be like that, more like a conversation that isn't so much about like staking schools and territories and schools of thought and so on, but like totally open-ended. I have a favorite book called Finite and Infinite Games that I read some years ago that came post-philosophy, that actually was more philosophy than anything I'd really ever read, about sort of a program to live by. And I am far from your question, but it makes the point about being completely open in a way that's rigorously honest. And so anything at any time is fine. Any influence, whatever.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Talking about your influences, how did your schooling, with the different backgrounds that you have, influence? How does that come out?
I would say indirectly. I really liked what I studied. I didn't feel that they were right for me, but I was glad that I studied them, and I still find myself sometimes reading a math monograph or a book of philosophy, and some people, what about physics? That's so important. You could do physics. I loved physics, but I wanted to be a little more philosophical. I wanted to be a little looser in how I as much as I appreciate sort of the hardness of the sciences, it didn't feel right for me. So I guess the answer is topically, in a variety of ways. There's a couple later that I'll touch on that'll bring physics like right in, but usually it's sort of indirect. I have to resist the temptation. These are my favorite 5 theorems. I've written poems that do that, and then I go, what?
Sounds cool.
Well, I have those tucked away, far away. Okay. A couple more etymology poems. It's titled in Latin Foris. Foris meant outside. So the forest was remote, was not a scripted park. Unsorted, the forest was scattered and riddled, musical and peopled with unknowns. Restless and unmannered, the forest was not foreign. As it happened, it was foreign, fruited, in that same word again. Foris, the ripening dark, the package mystery beyond our ken, our kin. And I have the kind of like right and left half of that poem. Here's it sort of again, in a way. This one's called Paradise. I'm going to mispronounce the Greek. The Greeks gave us paradeisos, from pere, around, taikos, wall. Paradise, an enclosed grove, a grove that knows no bounds beyond those of its own slow conversion to elsewhere, elsewhere's version of itself. The gated way, closure, we say, is what we want. The walls we drew, paradise so tight it could squeeze us out. And this one goes for a gusto near there, I think. Also etymology, but a little more enfolded. Actually, not much more. Titled Nagleria fowleri. Is the name of a freshwater amoeba that will, when you swim, if it can, enter through your nose and within days have eaten enough of your brain for you to die. I hesitate to understand what we are to make of this invisible, well-adapted danger. Besides denial, which would like to look back out into nostalgia, that fog of making peace with forgetfulness. Eden, for instance, a word that used to mean a well-watered place, we named at the dawn of righting wrongs. As our fertile crescent dried up fast as any spirit, any ghost departed, faith deserted, right before our almond eyes. Well, I have a political one. I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it. The title is an anagram, and it's I dedicated it to Freddie Gray, and Freddie Gray, the letters anagram to frayed dirge. Dirge is in music for a funeral, or yeah. So the idea of justice being blind is in here. I won't say more. Frayed dirge for Freddie Gray. Blind as the sea is restless, restless as an arc of solar wind, sent from a blind eye. Justice, what does darkness look like? A folded fog of cloth or silk? Black as sin, so close to skin it hurts to say? Darkness right in front of your eyes, that swift delay. Is it warm and thin as paper? Light leaks, justice. What are we to think of the exposure, whiting out the picture? Biting right into your lack of closure. Not fear not, but hope and vigilance, vigil by vigil? Or is that a ringing in ears we wear with pride? How we slip the covers over faith, how we lip service faith. Dirty word. Sincere and unseen work, body by body. No by no, by no, by yes, in some mysterious ratio or random walk or march, some bend or twisted blend. To you, justice? This one is ponderous, but it sort of picks up from there maybe in a way that would be good, so I'll try it. Skin and hide. Skin, so the boundary is alive. Hide, so the skin doesn't break against every wave. Skin, so the self is not the whole. Hide, so the whole is not the whole. Skin, so others have several layers to pass through by diffuse force or sudden invitation. Hide, so the skin has several skins, reservoirs sprung up together, spilling healing into hurt. Skin, so an organ can play at just barely willing, walling, or welling in a systematic wilderness. Hide, so the shifting interior can be worlds below sweat and perfume, oil painted, marl soft, and insight specific. Skin, So there's an overall contour to tour, a seamlessness to wander, bending with its bones. Hide, so the earth curves around the tour, and the tour doesn't end with the skins being lost or sloughed. Skin, so we have a place to attend, our own surface, ice-thin and just as grazed. Hide, so we end up a pelt cut from desire and disgust, furring the line between. That's perfect. Do you guys know what a palimpsest is? No? It's a text that's been erased and written over, often in an ancient context when, writing papyrus or other materials were scarce and needed to be reused, or just, well, I know better. One culture takes over and we'll reuse that. Yeah, so this ends with that word, so I better tell you what it is. It's titled, Wonder Has No Opposite. Wonder has no opposite, invisibly debossed, this trace of a heavy hand, or heart maybe, a zealous hand, maybe a light heart, in a heat lightning kind of way. Wonder has no opposite, Descartes might say, and did, in his list of the passions, 6 primary flavors: love and hate, joy and sadness, wonder and desire. Before any other, he wrote, wonder occurs first. Its virtue, curiosity, the wish to know. Its risk, astonishment, the wish to be stunned and not to know. In a coffee shop, I found a hotel pad in whose blank pages I could just discern the etch of those 4 plucky words, wonder has no opposite. An unsigned signature of someone's feeling they should write it down, this belief a cause, then tear the sheet and leave the rest, erased and not, a palimpsest.
Got a question.
Thank you, Susan. Do you feel that your poems are more personal, or do you think they're more distanced and more based around what you observe?
Yes.
Okay.
It's got to be everybody's got to find their blend of that, right? I think I'm kind of a bipolar on that, because as much as I distance and I admire and appreciate and even fetishize objectivity, it all crashes through, and then you gotta make an example out of something. So I know it's way off when it's one or the other. If I'm writing a journal entry, breaking it into lines, and it doesn't really ask a lot of me, challenge me or some way, or bring new things in, or show me where I was challenged on something, that feels blah. And if I'm doing some abstract wonking out on my goodbye, and I'll try and find pieces of it for something else later. But that sort of answer? Okay.
Could you say more about that in terms of your actual writing process? Like, how long does it take you to write a poem? How many poems do you work on at one time? How do you know when they're done? Those types of
Oh, they sound like those should be easy questions. I write a lot. I take from evolution that you try a lot of things and you see kind of what happens. Plus, I didn't come to this via creative writing or literature, so I had to especially figure out, what am I trying to do? So I've sort of tried lots of things. I find I like miniatures. I'm not good at long poems, so if I'm going down a long road, I probably realize this needs to be sections or this needs to be something else. But in terms of sort of process, how do I, what was the first part? How did you phrase it?
Well, just what's your writing process like? I mean, there's lots of aspects that you can ask. I mean, how do you know you've got something worthy of a poem? Do you test things out?
I never do. I never do. There are ones that I change my mind about so thoroughly that they end up in the trash, and it happens all the time. I feel like if I knew the answer to that, I would I would publish it, and I don't. Okay, to try to be serious, because I know it's a serious question, and I struggle with it. I just write, I guess, a lot, and I try to see what I recognize as getting more closer to something that I've been looking for, but not derivative or repetitive of something I've already done. I spend a lot of time on it. I'm not one of those people who thinks sit down for an hour, if nothing's there, go. I am one of those people whose ideas come to in the shower, and then I ruin my shower and like try to get them down and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to romanticize that there's no way to structure it, because there is. It's showing up all the time. It's sitting and giving time to it, reading things you love, whether they're poetry or other things. For me, it's a lot of other things. I like poetry a lot, but I can't be honest and say that like I just want to have a handle on everything going on in poetry. In the way that a lot of people do, I feel that I don't, and I have to be honest about that. Never know it's finished, but there are times when you have this clicky sense that I think you do in any art, or maybe a lot of things in life, when something feels like it clicks and it's maybe not finished, but it's provisionally finished in a way that I found what I was trying to do there and I didn't know it, and now I've found it. Something like that.
What's your revision process for your poems?
Okay, so kind of segueing from that, there's some few that show up that feel complete and that I can like tweak or pull, and then usually I put it back after 10 versions. And, the first was right. And most of them, though, are a scissoring of the fog, to borrow, I think, Iris Murdoch's phrase. That might not be right. And I struggle for a long time until I look at it again and like, oh, I see what I'm sort of trying to do. A lot of revisions, typically on those. Sometimes a frustrating number that then I feel like I'm just working this to death. You know, the raw and the cooked. I'm cooking, and it's like, I should feature the raw. Like the first thing usually arrived more or less from the subconscious, what it was trying to do. What am I trying to do to it? Like build a building? You know, it's not the same thing. So I get tangled up in that too. But I think it's worth always looking at that and not thinking that what came first is necessarily fixed, or you're afraid to touch it. Touch it. Save another draft. Save 3 more drafts. It can all be. There's plenty of data. Data storage now. You know, there's no reason to not.
Do you have an editor, like someone who checks all your work before it goes to books? No.
Well, he reads, but like he'll help me find. He helped me find the end of one that I'll read in a little bit.
Actually, that's what I wanted to ask was, do you ever get any benefit out of hearing someone else read your work back to you, or aloud, or to try to their interpretation of it? Or do you?
Yeah, definitely. I especially detect what I find to be weak spots if someone else reads it and it's like, oh, it is that bad. It only seems better in my mind because I'm kind of doing a dance with it or something, and it is just a kind of, you know, like, oh, yeah, I've said that before, or yeah, there's that, and yeah, sometimes there's something I just can't see until I see it from outside. I obviously am very caught up in my own head. It's partly my you know, my neurology, but it's also, I'm just an introspective. Those are my interests tend to point in. So I bring things in rather than bringing things out. So that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some random note for you.
Love
You
random.
were no, it is.
No, I love random.
So you're talking about how you like have shower thoughts and you like ruin your shower. There's a thing that you can buy on Amazon. And it's $8 and it's a waterproof notepad that you can write on.
All right. All right.
It's $8 on Amazon, and you should get it.
I love that you know the price.
I just looked it up.
Oh, okay. All right.
I was like, maybe it wasn't like 30 or something.
And I love
it's
that,
only $8.
that you're that attentive to detail. Cool. I'll consider that. What I used to do back in my Somerville days when I lived in the Boston area is I would steam pages in case there was like a phase where I'm going to have part of a poem and I actually have gotten way better at holding on to it. I used to do these walks in the woods where I have no phone with me. If I don't remember these lines, I'm going to lose them. So can I hold 4, 6, 8? And I got better at that. But early on, it was just scatter all over, and I'd steam some just regular old loose leaf onto the shower, and that was my, I guess, poor man's version of what Amazon has perfected. Yeah.
Do you have like a shelf full of like volumes of ideas where you keep down your ideas, like all different like volume books and journals where you like keep down dots and stuff?
Sort of. A lot of them I just save as early poems and just save it as if it's just another poem in the folder, rather than journaling separately. Since I guess, I don't know what impression you guys are taking, but I tend to think they're not super autobiographical, so idea of a separate journal doesn't come real natural to me about how to record it. So I record it, I guess, if it's in a way like starting to try to be something like a poem, and then I'll just save a bad poem. And I have a lot of those. Let's see. How am I doing on time? Okay? It's a quarter of.
Do you remember a turning point when you said to yourself, oh yes, I guess I am a poet?
I'm not to it. I don't know. I guess the reason I had that very awkward intro that I wrote for here is that I don't trust security. I don't trust knowledge in the way that I crave knowledge. I don't know how to know things like that. I love airplane turbulence. Not because I want to die, but because I like the suspension of me thinking I know what's what and in control. Was there a turning point? No, but there was. Okay, so when I got out of school, and I wasn't ready to apply for another degree in something that would be expensive, and I would maybe not at the end of it know whether I wanted to do that as a career. I thought I'm going to do this for a while because when I was in high school, I loved many things. I was a total school kid, nerd, but the thing that really stood out was when I got to like frame something that I loved. So there was an early Andrew Marvell poem that I like was giddily like I wrote, like I found a way to like redo this for an assignment, and I felt very happy about, again, a lot of subjects, but I didn't have that particular glee. So I thought, in my uncertainty, maybe I'll do this for a while. I read a newspaper article about editor at Poetry Magazine changing hands, and the whole thing kind of seemed like romantically possible for a little bit, and that was a dozen years ago. I don't really know how that connected to now, but here I am. I hope I don't sound really cavalier about everything. I'm trying to, it's like a mix for me. I'm really serious in what I say, but it's also, if I don't lighten it, it just feels like academic.
We wouldn't want that.
Right.
Yeah.
What did I just say? I have 2 very academic degrees. It's okay, I guess. I like academics. Okay. Speaking of physics, yeah, it's coupled with human loss, I guess. It's titled Of the Universe. By energy, 2/3 is night. 2 parts dark, 1 part light. 4/5 of all solid matter, whatever that is also dark, known only by its weight. 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 irreplaceable friend came to state, one sudden fall, that all our numbers are given to 0. Near the end, he'd ask, "Chris, do you see a pattern?" Not knowing then how to answer despair, I didn't see what to say. How our theories touch and go where they don't belong anyway. But neither do we not. The braid caught with the chance to wonder, is it really this careless, the caress of light inside the void? There is a especially physicsy one that I don't really think would be right. Do it? All right. Since you.
I was the president of Worldwide Youth in Science and Engineering in high school. I was about to major in physics, so like, yeah, bring it on.
I didn't ask her to say that.
Yeah.
It's got an epigraph from a quote from an article from 2014 about a recent physics breakthrough. The researchers are not shining light through crystal, they are transforming light into crystal. It sounds too poetic to be believable, but I've looked at, from my kind of now outsider's perspective, at what that was about, and that's pretty amazing, I thought. Hard light. In the ancient scheme, heat and light were the same. In the present understanding, each has little to offer the other. One is a flutter, a powwow of atoms. The other so immaterial, so even-keeled, it can't stop, except for death, called reabsorption. There's every harmonic in heat, but only one frequency per particle of light. If the energy difference isn't right, it's emission time along a geodesic line, which now means curved in mathematically captivating ways, taking precisely no time. Light only connects a somewhere to a somewhen, then vanishes, or from its vantage, vanishes always. Words fail, its timelessness. However brittle, squeezed, crystallized, or cold, light is ready to show us something startling in the restlessness of space, starting with its own momentum across distances too great to know any other way than its. A magnetic motion, more electric than alive. A monster, really. A cybernetic power, coherent as a crystal. Heat, it wasn't your seeking bodies that almost got us killed. That was infrared. Light, it remains to be seen what kind of hardness you'll mean. I have, if you like, a straight-up narrative poem that tells a story, and I will try it. It's called Late in the Afternoon. Yesterday effectively died with the bird you described, falling down the branches of a tree like a Plinko chip. I was sad to hear you say and not see, not share the sadness with you directly. I was sad to know you shot the bird, intentionally in the head. That third try, a dark charm, to get it to move away from our windows, where it pecked relentlessly for days on end at its own reflection in the one-way mirrored glass of the back lanai, where pitcher plants flourish and idle, courting accident, flavoring it with nectar like a flower. With such a fuss of repetition, repetition rattled us. Repetition rattled to a tap, like the drip of a hammer, woodpecker. What kept you pecking at the glass for sometimes often hours? Do I mention that you shit on every single window in a room made of windows? Do I add that he tried to put a pellet twice, first in the back of your body, and still you didn't seem to fear or desist from your fascinated task of tacking tiny nails to yourself until we were the sorry ones, responsible for you. You sorry sight. You sort of barely living thing that makes guilt instantaneous, reassessment instantaneous, words to cover over with. Do I say that I rallied us briefly with my awfully polite, in defense of gallows quip, that their ancestors, dinosaurs, used to eat us without a thought, much less a second feeling? Do I end reeling between something like dishonesty, a feint to rescue death below the fold, and something like dishonor, the fine print of omission? Do I leave out the part, bird, where you breathe fast and faster, panicking as you die, and bleeding from your head brighter than your feathers? If needless and unnatural, this relisting you from pain to passing notice, do I make certain someone knows a man ran in his own panic to make things better by being even worse? That a heavy branch was found, little life, to quickly snuff you out, quote unquote, to ease your suffering.
Is your approach to narrative poetry any different than it would be observational or?
I don't think so. I think it's continuous with my methods, I guess. I just, it's a matter of sort of ratios, like in cooking. This one's all, help me, cooking's not my
Do you find yourself, like, is narrative poetry something you do very seldom, or is it?
Pretty seldom, yeah. I don't feel comfortable. I called it, I didn't mean to dismiss it, to be dismissive when I said straight up narrative, but yeah, I'm not super comfortable. I don't know. I guess I'm real hesitant to think that there are just incidents from my life that are all that interesting. If I lived a different sort of life. But, well look, so like Charles Wright, a poet who can make it fascinating from his back porch and can tell those tales. I find that when I do that, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to convince myself that it's good enough to matter to someone else. Whereas if I guess if I find some little mechanism or something weird from the dictionary that you wouldn't have found otherwise, it won't feel like this is something that happened to you, why are you telling me about it? Oh, I've heard this before. I think I have a lot of anxieties. Narrative makes me anxious. Straight up narrative makes me anxious. And I don't mean that in any way to be dismissive of people who love narrative. For me, it's hard. I'm going to skip the weird anaphora poems and finish the ones from kindergarten with a little repetition tilted toward surprise instead. It's very short. Let's see what you guys think. You know what aversion therapy is? This is reversion therapy. Yes, body. Yes, thing. Yes, how. Yes, way. Yes, one. Yes, hope. Yes, chance. Yes, go. Yes, trespassing. Yes, wonder. Yes, frills. Yes, vacancy. Yes, ifs. Yes, ands. Yes, buts. Yes, pain. Yes, gain. Yes, time, like the present. So what I could do, time permitting, well, I brought poems from Tremblum, but I could just open it up all the way, or I could read a couple. I sent you guys this. Here's the thing about this. I have no idea what these poems are supposed to be yet. They're a mess. They embarrass me. This is a work in progress. And just like the weird introduction, I kind of like need to crave that and to act on that rather than just suffer it alone. So that's why, and I didn't want to send you a long book. Kindergarten is a full length. This is something that will probably turn into a chapbook. So those are short, you know, like, so that was just a few, I guess. Should I read a couple of those, or yeah? Well, here's a fun etymology. Because it seems right, but it's not really fully known. Dapple, so made maybe most famous by the Hopkins poem. Is the actual title that Glory, Pied Beauty, of course. Think of the first line, glory be to God for dappled things. So dapple, like spotted or uneven, mottled, or like striped even in some uses I've seen. So it's possibly connected to an Old Norse word for spot and a Norwegian word for puddle, weirdly enough. It's also possibly influenced by the Middle English adjective dapple gray, which referred to the actual spots on apples that form. So I like when a sound comes and says, I know you've got this meaning, but could you be more like this? And that seems to me kind of representative of poetry in general. So when etymology does that and like reappropriates something that was already going there anyway, especially, or can include it as well alongside, I love that. So dapple, 2 syllables and it takes all that in. I started the little thing, which I probably will keep as the intro. The new title, though, is One Insomnia, as in one episode of Insomnia. An acquiescence came and whispered. Darkness comes in dapple too. Not all of it is blight. It was then I felt I knew how much of my own nature I'd have to learn to fight. And by that I mean I can torture a rationalization out of a lot of things that are pretty terrible. And like a lot of people, you do that to sort of get through it. And I'm trying, what ends up, whatever this manuscript ends up being, I hope it will be honest about that. So what should I read from it? So poems in here have a lot to do with the mouth, literally. So, okay, fancy verb, prevaricate, means like transgress, deviate, make a sham accusation. Literally, I think it was to walk crookedly. So it's got prevaricate in it, okay. Similitude from verisimilitude, good enough. For want of a panacea, plants proceed on faith, animals on nerve. A grounded faith, a growing precarious nerve center, the body. Both sides lithe and abide in their ways. Both sides prevaricate, similitude in their own ways. Both sides trouble reductionists in their dreams of a single syrup to be made for and from us all. A poison, potion, toxin, and elixir. Umami through and through. I didn't tell you what umami is in case you didn't. Everybody got umami? Okay. Everybody's a foodie now. Everybody knows it. Could be a foodie at Target. I'm a Target foodie. Okay. So, have to be. Mouth. Demagogue. A thrash held in the mouth. His threshold, hell mouth. Fishing for the sweet spot, testing for the rot. Taste testing us. Taste testing us. Vindictiveness and vindication come from the same Latin word, twice the same bitter root, cleft to us, in the same absurd, susceptible tongue, with its same fork to choose from. Well, then that leads into what's the opposite of disarming? You think we're so innocent? Words I can't let alone, can't forget, can't get to the bottom of that abyss. If words meant what they mean, he'd literally be saying, you think we're so unharmed? Armed and disarming, disclaiming, innocence, in a sense, innocence broken into bits. I'm going to leave it there at the first half. The second half is not done yet. Said it was, but it isn't. Okay, let's see. This one's scenic.
I think I see questions in the first row over there.
Questions? Okay, good.
Maybe it's the second row. I can't quite tell. The hands aren't quite up very high yet.
Right, so in the way of inspiration, what do you do for that?
Oddly enough, for a while I had a muse of, I mentioned them, tropical pitcher plants, and the way they kind of inverted everything was nice. For me, they're carnivorous and they're a plant. That's starting, but they're also passive. They don't need to act. They just trick prey to fall in. And I thought that was kind of nicely turning the tables too, because normally you think of viciousness as being something active, and I'm quite good at just sitting there and being perfectly vicious. So, yeah, I wrote a bunch of poems on that, which didn't really turn out to much, but they kind of grounded me. They were like a muse for a while. Early on, it was things straight out of philosophy. I still, like the Descartes poem, sometimes find something that seems to survive from that without being heavy-handed about it. Etymology, when I say Dickinson in the dictionary and my twin loves, it's true. And if I'm spending another day in etymology, like browsing through things, weird coincidences, like way down some rabbit hole, and then come back up with like a couple of things that can breathe in our, I'm going nowhere. I was thinking of the water deep creatures who they don't look the same in light anyway when I try to pull those things up, and often they don't work. Yeah, those things I guess are my things. Anything I'm forgetting? Inspirations? I one time some years ago someone asked me, why is Armin never in your poems? And we've been together 15 years, and he is, but I don't go for it directly all the time. So he is definitely an inspiration, but not in the subject matter typically. I don't want to be, I don't.
Hi.
That's the one. So, yeah.
You had talked about promising to tell some of the writers that you read that influence you.
Sure, I can do that. I made a little list so that I don't neglect my favorites. Armin, can you?
Yeah.
Maybe okay. Womp. Right. Dickinson I mentioned. Szymborska, the Polish poet with a great sense of humor and also a sense of a sober seriousness. I love that combo. Experimental poets, Andrew Jorin plays with sound that in a way I started copying, and I had to resist that because I don't want to just I'm like imitating. And there's nothing wrong with good imitation, but I couldn't find what I was trying to do in that. So, because he will do at the level of syntax, he'll like kind of morph one word into another, and at sound level, in ways that actually make sense. And that's so hard to do, and I really admired that and wanted to do that myself, so that like words are by linguistic proximity, sort of like the next word actually connects to the next word by morphology and sound. And that's just, you got to commit to that. It's just some of that survived a little bit maybe, but Andrew Jorin I really admire for that ability. Heather McHugh, another brilliant poet who a great sense of humor, again, a sort of seriousness about things. That combination is I love. There's a poet who died from cystic fibrosis a couple years ago, Morgan Lucas Schultz, another experimental poet. Again, really playfully inventive with sound and other things. I love that. Antonio Porcia wrote a single book called Voices in English, translated into English, and one-liners and a little bit longer that have been anchors and sources of many thoughts. A.R. Ammons, the Cornell poet, and Ammons did a lot, and was especially early on, my sort of nature-y phase. My favorite of all is someone who's really not known at all. His real name is Tim Taylor, but he writes under a heteronym like Pessoa, alias, a literary alias. Ramick or Ramick, I don't know after many years of knowing him which it is. And he has a ton of stuff on the internet that you can just go to, timramick.net, and it's there. And it's weirdly challenging postmodern prose, but it is so exquisitely lyrical that if you give it time, it does things that I can't believe someone just putting that stuff out on the internet. So that,
How do you spell Ramick?
Ramick. Tim Ramick. And there it is, recorded with my ambiguity.
You got like time for one last poem, so whatever one you want to end it.
Okay. Then I better, let's see. which is pretty good because I got through most of these many poems. I think in that case, what sums it up? Yeah, okay. So, for the preppers out there, or anyone else trying to resist the logic of prepping, as in preparing for doomsday, the temptation moving. Higher and higher up the list. Some high cave to hide out in, already inside out by half. Half sky already fallen, half garden creeping over, half found and half founded stone, walls that moss or tendrils of cilantro, mint, or St. John's wort, that weed, the cave will become welcome through its mouths, depending on the climate. It depends on the climate more than us alone. Dwellers of the high cave may believe themselves alone already. They know alike how few boats will be built. What kind of response can we give to which tortured sense of being responsible? As comfort chills the earth creeping in, a group of mushrooms grows in a corner of the cave. In their full fruited bodies, what will they feed back into themselves? Squatting, half in squalor, half in hard-earned peace. That was the poem.